So it's fitting really nice. Obviously, as we go around and weld it, we'll line everything up because it still has a little bit of tension in it. But the bottom lines up nice. I just have to trim off a little bit along this edge and then hammer this in to kind of match the contour of the original. They kind of went in just a little bit. So once all this is tacked up, I can come in and hammer that and it won't bounce around on me. But happy with that. I sighted down the tape line and it's right on. Trying to hold it with one hand, but lines up really nice. You can see the edge here. I've got a little extension added on there, and then I'll trim it off once we start getting everything welded up, once it's in place final. But pretty happy with it. Down here at the bottom, it's lining up good for our cutouts and our recess to match the original. It's a little dark down there, but you can kind of see. We'll get everything, and then over here I think we'll add a little bit of metal here and here to extend that. It's a little short, so we'll add a little tab on each one of those to bring it out to look original anyway. And then we can start welding it in. So we'll end up final welding this all the way around, all the way, grind it down and dress it so it's not sticking up high. Put a little bit of probably primer on that. And then once that's good, we'll come in and get this tacked up, get it fit, and weld that. And then that patch panel will be done. Again, we have a little bit right there. We'll dig at that and see what's going on with that. But then, yeah, it's coming out nice. All right. So I've gone around and tacked it in, and I've taken a hammer and dolly and just kind of tapped it into alignment as I went around. I still got a little bit right here to do in that corner, but once you have it tacked and it's not going anywhere, and you have maybe every inch and a half or so tacked, then you can start filling it in, and you're still jumping around. You don't want to get it too hot. You can take an air blower and cool it off as you go along, but you're trying to avoid too much heat buildup where it's going to warp and get it out of position again. So keep it cool, jump around, and then as I go around, I'll take a little brush, because you'll get some soot, the black and brown. So come through and clean your welds every few times, and it'll give you a nice clean weld without a lot of contamination in there. So take your time. Do not rush it at this point. When you get to the welding, you want to go slow to avoid a heat buildup that's going to warp. And especially when we get to the outside, we want to control the heat as much as possible. Otherwise, we can really cave in this whole fender on the back, so we want to be careful. But it fits nice. I'm happy with it. So I'll go ahead and continue welding and filling it in, and grind it down from there. All right, so hopefully you can see. Basically, we just keep adding on to the first tacks that we did, right? So the first tacks were maybe an inch apart. And then maybe we do one in between those at a 1/2 inch, and then we just start adding on to those to start filling in the gap one dot at a time, right? So each spot, this keeps the metal cooler so it doesn't warp too much. You do still want to make sure that you're getting good penetration through to the back. You don't want it just sitting on the top. You want to make sure you're getting the metal hot enough to penetrate through to the back side, so it's strong enough. But I'll just continue on filling in the gaps, cleaning it every once in a while. It shouldn't take too much more. I just want to let it cool down a little bit in between, so we don't get too much movement and warpage. So let me continue on here. Alright, not bad. I could have had the heat a little bit higher on the welder to flatten them out a little bit. I was just too worried about the rusted metal being thin, so I just wanted to be cautious and I don't want to blow a bunch of holes in there. There was already some holes down here that were tough to fill. So I'll grind this down, maybe not completely flat. I mean, as long as the other piece fits over the top fine. It doesn't have to be like a metal finished piece. It can still have a little bit of weld showing. So I'll grind this down. I'll fit the outer, and if the outer fits all right, I can start tacking that up next. So pretty good. Alright, so I'm getting ready to grind this down, the welds. It's all fully welded. So now I'm going to start smoothing them out. Like I said, I'm not going to try to get it completely flat with the welds. It's really unnecessary on this. We'll get these flat, but these, we'll get them pretty close. Now you can go ahead and use just a regular grinder like we've been using, just an angle grinder with some 36 grit on there to grind it down, and we'll probably finish up with this. It does chew up the discs pretty fast when you're grinding welds with this. So a better solution is I'm using a cutoff tool, but with a grinding wheel. So I mean, it looks like the cutting wheels that we use to cut the panel, but they're a lot thicker. You see if you can see these. So this is the one we cut with. So this is the one we cut with, and you can see how thin that is. And this is the grinding one, so it's 2 to 3 times thicker. So don't try cutting with this one. It'll be a huge cut. It gets really hot. So cutting, grinding. So I'm going to use this to grind down and flatten out the welds. Now, when you're using this, you do want to be careful because they are aggressive. They will go through the metal pretty quickly. So you want to make sure that you're not grinding on the sides where the good metal's at. You just want to focus on flattening out the tops of the welds and being real careful as you get close and then you can go ahead and finish it off with a regular grinder if you need to, but do most of your grinding with one of these stone wheels. It'll save you time and some materials because they are more aggressive. So, and again, you want to be careful even when you're grinding to keep it moving. You don't want to stay in one spot too long because it will heat up the metal and it will warp the metal if you get it too hot. So keep it moving. You might want to cool it off once in a while or take a break in between to let the metal cool off. This one I'm not as worried about, the inner reinforcement. When we get to the outside, we're going to have to be real careful to not introduce too much heat, which could cause it to warp. All right, so we'll get started on this. I'm going to do the grinding, and I'll bring you back when it's close. All right, so I lost a little bit of the footage when I was grinding, but this is where we're at right here. The weld is pretty much smoothed down. Like I said, I'm not going to take it completely down, but it's looking pretty decent, right? It'll be flat enough for what we're doing. Now, I was talking about when we were doing the welding about having good penetration through to the backside. And this is the reason for it right here. For most of the time when we're working on cars and doing welding, you're probably going to grind the weld down and dress it when you're done to flatten it out so you can either do body work over the top or whatever. So when we do grind it, then you're grinding off most of the weld. So if it doesn't penetrate all the way to the backside, it's probably going to crack, right? So if you end up grinding off all of your weld without having good penetration, you'll end up running a crack eventually just from vibration and heat and cold. Expanding and contracting with the hot and the cold, you'll end up with running a crack. So you want to make sure that you're running a hot enough weld to get to the back side because you're probably going to grind it flat. Now on this one, like I said, I wasn't going to go too hot on the welding just because I'm dealing with rusty metal and I didn't want to blow through it and get it too hot. So I did have the welding turned down just a little bit, and it's fine for what we got here. But just a word of caution, you want to make sure you're going through to the backside as well. I'm going to finish this up probably with the regular grinding disc just to smooth it out just a little bit. And then what I believe we're probably pretty close to being able to get this outer piece ready to go. And last night I had added some I remember I needed to extend these a little bit because they were short to match the original reinforcement. All right, so we're gonna get those trimmed out. I gotta dress those up a little bit and finish welding those, but that'll be good. And then I think we're pretty close to welding this on. I'll do a little final fitment and we should be pretty close to getting this tacked in. Before I weld this piece on though, I will put a little bit of primer or something over this just to protect the bare metal. With paint, it's going to hold out quite a bit better. But if you look at the original, this is all the original, so this does have surface rust in it, and this reinforcement goes all the way up to the top of the fender. So if you can imagine up inside of here, it looks the same as this. So it's rusty from being original, right, when they manufactured it, because they don't get a coating on the inside here. The main thing is we don't want to have this area packed with dirt and moisture where it's going to continue to really eat through the metal. If it has a chance to dry out in between, driving or whatever, you'll be fine. It's just when it's in contact with water for long periods of time is when the rust starts. But we will put something over this. And one of the things you do want to watch out for when you're getting the inner stuff treated for rust, you want to make sure you don't get it where you're going to be welding. Any paint where the welding is going to be going will introduce contaminants into the weld, and it'll pop and sputter and be all bubbly. So you want to put some masking tape wherever you're going to be welding to cover that up, and just get the paint or primer on the big areas where you want to protect it. All right, so I'll do a little bit of grinding. I'll double check my fitment on the outer piece, and maybe we'll start tacking this up next. All right, so it's looking decent, and I don't need to take off all the black paint from the new piece. It's totally fine. I mean, you can grind it down to bare metal if you want, but to me, that's just a little extra layer of rust protection. So we'll leave that on there and just paint over the top of that. We'll give it a little scuff. The last thing, I'll probably need to adjust this edge a little bit to match up with the new piece, and finish welding that, grind that, and then I think we'll be ready. Pretty happy with that. Right, so I got a little bit of primer on there. It's all ground down and primed. Now I left the edge of it bare because I'll be welding to that, and a little bit along the bottom I'm going to be welding to this. So again, I don't want to put any paint there. You can use a weld through primer on that. I don't have any. It'll be fine. But if you remember, that's what we cut out of there, and that's what we're left with. So we're on the right track. Okay. And then on the new piece for the outer, I went ahead and I ground around the edges, and I did a little bit on the inside just so that contamination doesn't come through the weld. And I think we'll be ready to clamp it up there and start tacking it in. So next up, we'll be spot welding that one in.